Hello there, and a big warm welcome back to session 2 of Join Digital, episode 4. So we just heard from Gavin at Dot Digital, and now we've got Mary Kay, who's Vice President of Strategic Data and Sales Enablement at Allant Group, here with us. Thank you so much for joining us, Mary Kay. So as always, if you have any questions throughout this session that you'd like to send over to us, please feel free to do so, and we'll try and get to them at the end. The session should last about 30 minutes, and we're going to be talking about leveraging zero, first, and third-party data sources. Okay, so Mary Kay, if you are ready, I will pass over to you.
Okay, great. Good morning. Thanks, Jennifer, or good afternoon. Thank you all for tuning in. Today, we will talk about how to complete a holistic view of the customer by understanding the state of the data and the need for personalization, and how this is accomplished. It's through cross-device identification techniques, identity graphs, and linking technology. As we all know, technology advancements have been helping us recently rein in the problem of identifying customers and multiple device touchpoints and different identifiers across ultimately siloed systems within an organization, and allowing brands to bring this data together to create that holistic view of the customer. And we'll cover how that is done today. So let's begin. We live in a world that is increasingly connected, which is contributing to an explosion of data. This slide depicts how a consumer today interacts with any brand across any vertical. They come in through multiple channels, and each interaction provides valuable pieces of information. The channels they come across are mail, mobile, social, digital, and this creates the omni-channel experience. 77% of consumers have smartphones. 51% own tablets. We're collecting data from social media platforms that now have buy technology. Consumers are shopping both on their mobile and in stores and back and forth again across the complete customer journey. People, as we know, and including myself, are always on their mobile devices and always connected to social media. This makes the consumer feel that the brand should know them and should be able to leverage all their data to integrate both their online and offline behaviors. Data is growing on a massive scale, and it has been for many years. We refer to it as big data. The amount of data being collected and stored is just staggering, as this slide shows. The volume of data relative to 10 or even 5 years ago has grown exponentially. We now have the Internet of Things. We have social media logs and website logs, along with all the device information. And as the past, we have started with structured data, your regular marketing data, your CRM, point of sales, and your ERP systems. And now you can connect that to your e-commerce applications, just making that data continue to grow. And then, as I mentioned, we have the unstructured data with your web and your text and your social media platforms. Most recently, the machines, whether it's the device we carry or sensors for the Internet of Things, are generating even large amounts of data. People know you have those beacons in the stores. They know where you are at that store and what you're looking at. All this volume of data is so rich in information, and it can be used across the organization. You just need to know how to connect it and create that holistic view of the customer. More than half of consumers under 50 want more personalized ads. I would say even the ones over 50 want personalized ads. And the reason for that is the relevance. They want the ad to be relevant. We are inundated with multiple ads across from billboards, radio ads, and on our digital devices, and we want that data to be irrelevant. How do you get relevant? The brand must recognize the consumer, they must show that they know who that consumer is, and they must reward them. Because as a consumer, I'm going to give you information about myself. I want to be rewarded for my loyalty. Relevance equals personalization. Switching gears just a little before we dive deeper into how to gather all that information, just some information about the brand. As shown on this slide, 58% of marketers have no way to see 360-degree view of the customer. Well, 88% of marketers who are utilizing personalization are seeing improvement in KPIs for both marketing and operations. I like the 67% of companies are increasing significantly their budgets to focus on data, which is important. This shows me that brands realize they need to start spending more money and understanding and identifying where that data is coming from. What businesses are now realizing is they must become efficient in identifying meaningful, useful, quality data. They are learning to supplement zero and first-party data with the right second and third-party data to complete that holistic view of the customer and use it to enable personalization for the customer. We all know what first-party data is. This is what you, the brands, are collecting. You're collecting it at point of sales, on your e-commerce site. That's information that happens when the consumer is interacting with you. Second-party data is co-op data, vertical specific data that sometimes is used to supplement and complete that holistic view. Third-party data has been around forever. That is the demographic data, the interest behavior data that also can supplement the view of the customer. Something that we don't often think about is this zero-party data. This is data that the consumer explicitly shares with the brand. For instance, I give you my birthday so that you can reward me in September and with some coupon. Or I tell you I like running, or I like jeans, or I like white pants. This is information I'm supplying to the brand that lets you know, the brand know how to market to me. A lot of brands ignore or don't often leverage that zero-party data. Customers' insights are the gold buried within your data. There is a precious nuggets within that information that need to be discovered and acted upon that are often overlooked. Well, how do you act upon them? Analytics helps brands transform the large volumes of customer data into analytic insight to optimize and design customer-focused programs and drive personalized marketing campaigns. Companies that do this, we all know them, Amazon, Netflix, Apple, and others, have used their ability to discover insights in all their data and act faster than their rivals as a competitive advantage. We all know Amazon saying, here's what we think you will like, here's what other people bought. That's an idea of personalization. Netflix used data years ago to beat out Blockbuster. What they did is they were able to start tracking what consumers were renting and be able to make suggestions on other movies they would like. Using analytics to glean insights from the data and acting accordingly is key to improving marketing insights, relevance, and personalization. I would love to get into analytics, but I know that's a session for later today. So now I will talk about how you start creating a holistic view of the customer. To achieve a comprehensive view of a customer, a common set of identifiers must be assigned to core pieces of data on each record on the multiple disparate parts and data sources to correctly identify the consumer at each touch point. When this is done, we can start to know who each customer really is and what they are trying to tell us as one clearly identified person. The process of bringing the data in various touch points and sources, both internal and external, together into a holistic view is the challenge for many organizations. So you're not alone, we're not alone. It is depicted well on this slide. You can see that sometimes the loyalty programs don't talk to the accounting system, or the customer care system is a totally siloed system. Creating a holistic view is identifying anonymous consumers to known entities across multiple disparate parts within each of these siloed systems. A 2016 Forrester report stated a consolidated identity supports consumer recognition and addressability across touch points. Profiles unite identity and descriptive information about the consumer to support contextual marketing. You must build profiles by aggregating device and channel data, behavior and interactions, self-submitted information, that's your zero-party data, purchase and customer data, and third-party data sources. As this slide illustrates, we start with inferred and probabilistic identification and continue to build upon that identity until enough data is collected and stitched together to create that holistic view of the customer identity. As we look at the top left-hand corner of the slide, the process of identifying anonymous interactions to known interactions starts with a collection of inferred probabilistic data, such as location and device data. As we move to the right with a collection of tracking data, such as cookies, with permission, of course, search history, session history, the identity starts to develop through this digital tracking. As we continue to move through the identity resolution, we begin to add in data that partially identifies the customer. This data is provided by the consumer to the brand in order to gain offers or services. This is known as zero-party data. I left this out before. The email, social handles, I talked about birth dates, my preferences, what I like are all good examples. The identity starts to come together through cross-device identification and leveraging terrestrial, your PII, your location, and digital identity graphs until the full identity is confirmed with the consumer through captured or consumer-supplied PII, zero, or first-party data. Finally, the identity is realized by stitching together all those disparate parts of the data to create the full customer identity, creating that holistic view, and this will now support customer personalization. The first step in creating a holistic identity is the process of identifying unknown to known consumers, leveraging a cross-device identification methodology, or what we like to call XDID. As marketers, we strive to understand customers by achieving a single unified profile of them. When consumers began using multiple devices to engage with a brand, the goal became more challenging. Cross-device identification changes everything. The days of depending on web-based cookies to follow customer buying behaviors are over. Consumers in 2020 are using as many as 5 devices for e-commerce. Think about your devices, your mobile phone, a tablet, your work desktop, or your personal laptop, just to name a few. We may even switch devices multiple times in just 1 hour. I know recently working from home, I'm on my phone, I'm on my laptop, I'm on my personal laptop. There is many different times within an hour I change devices. Cross-device identification is achieved by linking customers' multiple devices to one identifying and piecing all that fragmented data together, like this slide shows, pieces of a puzzle. Once this is done, voila, a complete view of your customer is achieved by linking all those pieces together to enhance your marketing programs and definitely inform personalization. You might be asking, well, how can this be done and be done in a privacy compliant manner? Cross-device identification currently applies 2 approaches to form customer identity, just like in the digital world, probabilistic and deterministic. I'm going to just review what the difference between probabilistic and deterministic methods are for some of the audience who might not understand. The probabilistic method uses algorithms to deduce the likelihood that different devices represent the same person. It achieves this by interpreting anonymous information, such as an IP address, a physical address, a zip+4, and a browser. And then it takes an algorithm to determine these factors are similar enough, they will be then identified as one person. Because the method relies on being probable as opposed to specific, it may be less certain, but it can also be more adaptive. A lot of time, probabilistic matches or identities are used for digital targeting. The deterministic approach, as we know, matches to users in a precise identifier, such as your email, app ID, social media login. Because the approach aims for exact pairings, it provides a more accurate and scalable view of the customer. which can be ideal for direct, personalized communication. Many thought leaders recommend combining probabilistic and deterministic methods to balance the narrow focus of exact insights with a broader view of informed guesswork. You always want to start with deterministic matching first and expand to probabilistic. What is cross-device identification? At the simplest level, it is identifying website visitor or app users to gain insights into their behavior, connecting this to offline data, creating that holistic view of them, and then using this data to engage the consumer at the right time with the right message, the right offer, and the right channel. And you have to do this with all without being very creepy. Now you might be asking yourself, how can I do this? Cross-device identification techniques enable this to be done seamlessly. A new derivative technology allows brands to capture anonymous website traffic and convert into entities. It works by capturing the IP address, device ID, tag, or a pixel, which is just a line of code embedded in the website or within the app, to capture visitors at the digital touch point. We then apply a reverse match and convert those site visitors to terrestrial information, name and address information. This data then can be fed back into your CRM system, or if they're a prospect, it can be reused for any of your digital, email, or postal campaigns. What does this all mean to marketers and brands? Here are some key benefits of cross-device identification and creating the holistic view of the customer. Most importantly, it creates actionable data by capturing and converting anonymous digital traffic into identifiable consumers, who then can be identified both as your customers, if they didn't self-identify, or prospects. So now you have two pools. You can treat your customers with like you know them and relevant information, and the prospects. Most importantly, I believe it is privacy compliant. Names and address are captured in a safe harbor, and you are not able to directly tie back to digital identifiers. This complies with all regulations. It provides a great source for continuous cross-device identification, continuous feeds of app and web information. It can be deployed on a single page, multiple pages, multiple applications, and it can run all year long in the background, and that helps feed your systems throughout the year and continue to throw those leads into existing campaigns. It also enables personalization. By leveraging the new data now linked to the consumer, brands can link these prospects and customers to first-party data and create custom models. These records can also be enriched and appended to create thresholds for contact and offer versioning. Now I'm going to be able to get the same message and the same ad across multiple devices and channels. Finally, cross-device identification allows retargeting within the digital channels and also enables these audiences to be reached via postal or email channels. And it enables multiple touch attribution, allowing for matchback of converted names to measure campaign effectiveness or ROI and identify which campaigns are performing better. So not only are you helping the consumer and your customer feel more connected to the brand, you're also now be able to measure on the back end. As previously mentioned, the first step in creating a holistic view of your customer is completing the cross-device identification. We just finished up that discussion. The next step is leveraging this information to create a holistic view across your entire organization. This can be completed by leveraging an identity graph. Identification is completed by leveraging a bi-directional crosswalk that bridges physical and digital entities together. As we look at the slide, starting on the left, we see a depiction of a terrestrial identity graph. This type of identification we are all familiar with. Starting at the bottom, the email, the phone number, demographics, that's information you've collected. apply a persistent identifier, it's linked to the consumer, and it goes up to the household. This is much more of a deterministic matching. Now moving to the right box, we see how to leverage a digital identity graph to create a crosswalk between cookies made and hashed emails using cross-device identification, which we just talked about, and applying an individual digital persistent ID to the consumer and then linking it to the household. So you have multiple devices associated with a IP and a household. It gets moved up to the individual or identified to the individual and then linked back to the household. This middle box illustrates how within an identity graph, the terrestrial IDs on the left and the digital IDs on the right are married using primary keys by optimizing a bidirectional crosswalk where the IDs can be mapped, where the terrestrial IDs can be mapped to the digital IDs in a privacy compliant manner and use case specific, and complete that holistic view of the customer. The point of this slide is that the digital information never, the raw digital information, I should say, the device ID, the IP, the cookie, never directly links back to the PII data. It's done through a crosswalk in digital identifiers. This all sounds simple, but it's just a little bit more complicated than it sounds. Let's take a quick look behind the scenes. This 2019 Forrester graph demonstrates the touch points a consumer is able to interact with a brand. The top half depicts just a few of the identifiers and digital identifiers and terrestrial identifiers that could be captured during the customer journey. That's the bottom half. The top half is how they all come in: your web, your smart, your email campaign, your e-commerce purchase, and your customer call center. In this Forrester graph from the same 2019 article, you can see how the identity graphs are created by cataloging information into categories, such as persons, households, devices, and then sorts that capture identifiers into categories and then builds the connections of linking across the caption identifiers. So from the first graph, we saw that how where the cookies and the device ID were all captured from different channels. This process now sorts them into the person, the household, and the device and begins linking them together. As a benchmark, leading identity graph providers can have as many as 50,000 rules. I know I only have about 15 lines on this slide, but there's 50,000 rules in most identity graphs that are leveraged to make all these connections. These graphs, along with cross-device identification, enable brands to create that holistic view of the customer. According to the Association of National Advertisers, here are some best practices for laying the groundwork and completing the holistic view of the customer. First, identify all your first-party data that should potentially be included in the identity graph, including all that data from those siloed systems. Next, identify a singular persistent identifier to serve as the foundation for foundational identity data. This could be your email address, phone number, unique number, loyalty number. The best choice for this identity marker, or the persistent ID, with the largest scale. Sometimes if you're doing a digital campaign, it might be your email address. Others use a persistent ID that's assigned by the identity graph and leverage that across the organization. Whatever it is, it needs to be a scalable identifier that can be linked across multiple channels and devices. We continue with best practice by identifying the next step and evaluate the gaps in identity data to determine the kinds of data you will need to ingest from all data sources to complete and confirm your identity graph. Some things to consider are the quality of the data, the quantity, the cost, how well it matches. But you have to evaluate all that data to make sure you're not leaving anything on the floor. A lot of companies start as their first step to do a comprehensive data audit across all their systems so they know what's available, what's relevant, what's important, and most importantly, what the cost is to obtaining that data. And finally, identify the kinds of attribute data you need to ingest and build and expand the customer profiles, including the zero-party data, the first-party transaction data, as well as additional demographic data, behavioral, and purchase data from third-party sources. A lot of companies, after they do the evaluation of their data or the audit of their data, they realize they don't have enough data available to them to complete that holistic view, to make those experiences with the consumer relevant and personal. So it's a good idea to start looking at other data from your third party and your second party data providers. What are some of the deployment considerations? We previously outlined the benefits of the cross-device identification process. Now bringing it all together with the inclusion of the identity graph, deployment or ingestion of the identity graph should start with some key considerations. You should determine what you want your identity graph to help you complete. And as you know, processing needs for execution differ based on those use cases. First, you must consider all possible methods for deployment. And you must look at how each processing needs to handle different. Do you want it for marketing or modeling? Do you want it to deploy across all your channels or just one channel? For example, a website marketer might want personalization. The identity graph must process those records in real time. But for your data scientists, you don't need the information in real time. Another consideration, do you want to reach more of your best customers and prospects by leveraging every available consumer touch point and accurately resolve to optimize the omni-channel experience? If so, this would entail the continual update and addition of more identity markers to continuously achieve relevant scale. Other brands may want to leverage the identity graph to provide the ability to find lookalike consumers based on resolved identities tied to engagement and purchase behavior. Another use case is for an identity graph to improve attribution of your campaigns by resolving identity through multiple touch points. And some brands use an identity graph to optimize modeling and analytics. And deploying the identity graph for this use case is key to collecting the right data for creating models to drive marketing insights and strategy. Finally, and probably most important use case, the collection of all data and data touchpoints. All of usable or what may be perceived unusable data needs to be evaluated and plays an important part of optimization and completing the holistic view of the customer. I love this slide. It depicts how we feel as marketers trying to get all those anonymous and known fragmented views and touch points of the consumer put into a complete holistic view of the customer. This is pretty complete, as we can see on the data on the right-hand side. And this information, especially on the right-hand side, will enable relevant messaging and personalization. Using cross-device identification and leveraging an identity graph allows us to achieve this goal, and we begin to understand the benefits it provides. Using all these technologies of collecting data, cross-device identification, and identity graphs is the key to accurate, personalized omnichannel marketing for both inbound and outbound, and it includes analytics, segmenting, targeting, recognition, and personalization. They provide more accurate and complete data and also improves accuracy of automated messaging, the next best offer, AI, and machine learning. They are the key to optimizing your customer experiences across multiple channels, enabling customer recognition regardless of where or how the consumer interacts with you. These processes are the key to accurate measurements, as we talked about, measuring marketing efforts and attributing sales. It's a great method to begin to leverage and produce ROI. And finally, it is the foundation for analytics and data modeling. We can do predictive and descriptive data modeling and data analytics on the data that is collected. And this will help you make future business decisions based on this data and intelligence. Thank you for your time today. And I now will turn it back over to Jennifer, who may have some questions or closing comments.
Thank you very much, Mary Kay. Yes, we do. We've had some questions through. If we could pop to the next slide, I will just take a look at what questions we've had through. Perfect. Okay, so the first question that came through that I want to cover says, I heard that resolving to digital data is not privacy compliant. How is your methodology privacy compliant?
So with the technology being used, and I had shown on the identity graph, that crosswalk that has a digital identifier with an ID, an anonymous ID that you can't resolve back to the device ID, the maid, or the cookie, that is assigned just a random numeric ID, and then there's a crosswalk that identifies it to the random ID of the consumer on the other side. This is done in batches of 100 or more, so that you can't say 123 Main Street is equal to device ID 123456, and it is privacy compliant and meets all the regulation standards.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sending that question through. And the next one we're going to cover, because I know that we're a bit short for time, is once I identify who has been to my website, what do I do with the data that I've collected?
So with the data that you've collected, you first want to analyze it and then be able to sort it through and use it within models of behavior and predicted behavior to address and be able to make that next best offer, and leverage it to provide relevant ads and segment your customers into different campaigns so that they are getting those those ads that are relevant to them.
Excellent. Thanks very much for sending that question through. So I know we've mentioned this a couple of times before on some of the other sessions. Any questions that we don't manage to cover during the live session will always get answered offline. So even if we don't cover them now, please keep sending them through. We'll make sure we get back to you by email. Well, thank you very much, Mary Kay, for presenting today. It was great to have you here with us. So that brings us to the end of this session. Up next for episode 4 of Join Digital, we've got Fresh Relevance talking about different marketing tactics for coming back stronger after a crisis. So just as a reminder, you'll need to log out of this session and then log back in about 20 minutes or so. You should receive an email from us just as a reminder of the session, and it will include your joining link. So keep an eye out for that. But thanks very much for joining this session today, and we'll hopefully see you back in about half an hour.
Thank you.
Thanks.